Today we're going to be dealing with the gumball immigration argument. Intro. Okay, so the reason for this is because I was kind of a little bit of a dick here, but I was laying in bed and I was like, okay, I'm talking to some, I guess like traditional Catholic, like conservative people. That doesn't. They tend to be like very like conventionally far right and very religious in nature. Kind of interesting to talk to sometimes. At least I like talking to Dave sometimes. Sometimes Dave, I like talking to you. So this guy said that he's right wing because graphs and data. To the extent I have left wing views, mainly because someone convinced me at one point, usually with graphs, arguments, and etc. This came from us generally arguing about the right wing not being data driven or whatever. So give me a couple of issues, convinced you on the other side, and then I read this from my bed, did not see the video preview. How about immigration as poverty relief? And I'm just like, I have never in my life heard anyone make that argument except this video, which I watched about 2 or 3 years ago. So I don't remember all the contours of this video, but I remember thinking it was superficially very fucking stupid. I did some quick math on the background because I remember the rough structure of the argument, but I have not actually watched the video yet. I just tested the audio levels real quick. So I said this, which I guess is like a little rude, very dismissive, very arrogant of me. That I was hoping it wasn't the gumball video. Nah, he's too smart for the gumball video. And then it was the gumball video. God, I fucking hate Twitter. But we're gonna go over the gumball argument real quick because there's got a few problems. One, I think it's just wrong in parts, and two, it's just wrong in parts, and it's also battling a straw man. So I guess I'll preempt this a little bit and say, does immigration really help the poor? And the answer is yes, to the people who immigrate to the country, right? It does help them rise themselves out of poverty. If you go and you work in a first world country, that enables you to have economic opportunity you didn't have in your home country. This is true. Now, this isn't the main argument used to justify immigrants. Like, I'm fairly left-leaning. I guess I have been for a couple of years now. I used to be like a right-wing libertarian-ish, moved my way over slowly. But I've never ever heard this fucking argument. Like maybe if you argued mass migration, some weird like open borders thing. Like I don't know, but I've never really heard that fucking argument. Usually it's like it's beneficial to the host country. They integrate well. They have low rates of crime. Like all the regular shit you have to combat, like bigots saying. Because if you're telling me they have high rates of crime, like this is very easily Googleable, you know. Yeah, whatever. Okay, let's go into the video. I've what's it called? Buried the lead on this enough.
Some people say that mass immigration into the United States can help reduce world poverty.
Okay, let's Google this claim off the bat. Let's see how actually prevalent this is. Immigration into the U.S. to fight poverty. That's crazy. You guys can't even. These settings I use are interesting. Wait, hold on. Is this not working? Can you? What the fuck? Do I have like? You guys can't see what I'm Googling right now. Oh, wait, is it working now? Okay. Alright, well that was fun. I guess I'll edit that together and update some OBS. Alright, let's deal with this one.
Some people say that mass immigration into the United States can help reduce world poverty. Is that true? Well, no, it's not.
So when he says some say, I kind of alluded to it earlier, I think. I don't, are there some people who say that? Probably. But let's see, like, the contours around that. Immigration to reduce poverty. I kind of glossed at this a little earlier because I remember that was the crux of his argument. Immigration and poverty, let's see. World Bank can be a potent tool. Okay, this one sounds like it conforms roughly to what he's saying. Well, it's old. I'm pretty sure this video is fairly old. Like, yeah, whatever. Global immigration has lifted millions out of poverty and boosted economic growth and new world. See, like, even this is talking about it lifted people out of poverty and it boosted economic growth. Like, this is always listed as like a sort of feel-good argument. Like, yeah, it helps lift them out of poverty, but like, this isn't, no one's really arguing that as like, oh, this is like the sole unilateral good you need to do. It just benefits everyone across the board. Like, whatever. The destination countries risk losing out in the global competition for talent, leaving large gaps in labor markets by failing to implement policies that address labor market forces. And what are we even saying here? Lower higher wages, rates of migrants. It's shareable. Yeah, I mean, none of it, like this article. Okay, this is like the first time I found this from the World Bank, though, which I guess would be like one of the places you'd expect to see. I'm pretty sure they're the ones who also maintain the $1.90 index thing or whatever. They're like, oh, world poverty index is based on like making $1.90 a day or less or something, which we'll probably address later. But like even this is like talking about how it fits into like your economic like market. Like, okay, like whatever, we'll take this for what it's worth, but.
And let me show you why. This gumball represents the 1 million legal immigrants that the United States has taken every year on average since 1990. Now, who in the world deserves our humanitarian compassion? The World Bank has one measure of the desperately poor of the world. They make less than $2.
Wait, so he was referencing the World Bank. All right, whatever.
A day. And how many people?
Whoops. Spelling is hard. This one's from 2011. Dude, look at poverty just driving down. Crazy. So I hate this measurement anyway, but he's using it, so we'll just take it for what it's worth. Let's see, whatever.
People make less than $2 a day in the world? We'll start with Africa. In Africa alone, there are 650 million people who make less than $2 a day. 650 million. And in India, another 890 million people, desperately poor.
Look how illustrative this is.
Adds another 480 million people, making less than $2 a day. And unfortunately,
Can I tell what year this was made in? Because like I was looking at this thing, and like depending on when he said this, like yeah, I mean he said since 1990 we've taken 1 million on average, right? So you see this number like decreasing rapidly. Depending on when he made this, I'm sure those numbers might be accurate. I'll grant him that. So I was going to use the current one, but like I think this sort of illustrates part of his problem, right?
The rest of Asia has a heartbreaking 810.
Can I see when he made this presentation? The 1996 version. Okay. So he used 6 years of immigration data. Wait, hold on. World Bank's colorful presentation data on the World Bank U.S. Census Bureau. The 1996 version has been one of the most viewed policy presentations on the internet from 2002. Yeah, okay. So this was in 1996. So he's using 6 years of average immigrant data. Let's go back to this. Let's see. I said 1996. Yeah, so I'll grant it. Well, I don't know. Even that's not really great. Like, we can look at this. So he made this presentation in 1996 where the poverty rate was at about 30%. Now it's at 10%, though, without really much changing in terms of our immigration rate. But, like, you can see there's been, like, large drops and declining decrease since then. So the problem that he's, like, sort of getting at here that, like, oh, we can't solve poverty because there's so many poor people, we can't take them all into our country. It's like, well, no, that would be one tool in which you can help address poverty if that's really how you're trying to do it, right? You can spur economic advancement in other in other countries. You can help develop economies. You can have like real international efforts to raising poverty and raising raising well-being, or economic well-being standards in countries. Like, you can do that. But another tool could be some robust immigration policy. Now, part of the problem is he's only focusing on the United States. Now, I would argue that that is flawed in and of itself.
Who the World Bank says make less than $2 a day.
So, admittedly, like I want to make it clear. When he made this argument, it's probably a little stronger than it is now, but I'm having people cite this to me now as though it's like it's anywhere near as robust.
And finally, there's 105 million of Latin America's population.
So he's talking about our immigration rate of 1 million a year, which I would agree is very low. But like, if we would say that, you know, let's have a more robust like immigration policy. So instead of doing like 1 million, we do let's say like 2% of someone of your population you take in immigrants a year. So let's do calculator. Oh, you guys can't see my calculator. That's fine. You'll have to trust me. So let's do 330 million times 0.02 for 2%. That'd be 6 million immigrants a year. Let's even lower that. Let's say 1.5. Let's do 1.5. 330 times 0.5. That is way too high of a number. Okay, so let's just say you do a 1.5% of your population immigration rate, which sounds really high, but it's really not. It's a byproduct of our immigration rate now being very low. So 1890 to 1920 U.S. immigration. So this was a height of immigration in the U.S. where we took in what would be equivalent to about 5 million people a year, if I remember correctly. I think it was about 20 million immigrants. Where the fuck is it? I have a tab machine over here. White people, good characters, this shit. More than 12 million immigrants would enter the United States through Ellis Island between, well, let's just do Ellis Island. I guess that's where all of it came from.
Today, Irish Americans are just considered American.
Don't do that. Yeah, we did all this weird, like, establishing literacy requirements. The U.S. has been very anti-immigrant. It's kind of, like, weird. Like, we've always had these spurs of, like, anti-immigrant shit. Okay, so this is, 20 million. Okay, more than 20 million immigrants arrived. Between 1880 and 1920, more than 20 million immigrants arrived. U.S. population, 1880. 50 million. So that's about 40% of our population over 40 years immigrated here over from 1880 to whatever. It's a very large number.
Today, Irish Americans are just
motherfucker. So I've crunched this number before. I'm gonna say like it comes out to about like what would be today equivalent to about 4 to 5 million. Oh wait, 2 to 3. I'll say about 3 million immigrants like a year right now. So let's say what that would be. That'd be about 1% of our population in immigrants a year. So if we were to apply that to the entire first world, let's see, that's about 20% of the population. Where's the calculator? Jesus Christ. This is all of a sudden just became a math stream, huh? So 7.8 billion people in the world times 0.195, which is first world, 19.5%, which is 1.5 billion people live in like a first world country. It includes Japan, Western Europe, United States, Canada, etc. Let's do times 0.01. That'd be about 15 million immigrants a year that we would take collectively in the first world.
That are desperately poor. All told, the World Bank says there are 3 billion people in the world. 3 billion people.
So what's crazy is like when we talk about like the 1996. Okay, we're closing all this shit. Jesus Christ, triggering me into the ground right now. Like when he made this video, that was probably pretty close to correct, right? He said 1996. But now we're only at 10 million. So, hey, maybe this argument's actually viable now, right? If we increase our immigration to higher rates than what he's talking about, we expand that general notion to the whole first world, then all of a sudden we have a large amount of immigrants and a way lower amount of people who need to be taken out of poverty. Even if pretending that his argument is actually accurate, it's much more viable now.
Desperately poor, making less than $2 a day. That's 3,000 gumballs. And every year, we take 1 million and suggest that we've somehow made a humanitarian difference?
So he said there's what, about 3 billion people who are in poverty, according to this data. I think that was an overshoot on his part, but like whatever, it doesn't really matter. Now the number's down to 9.2%. We'll round that up to 10 just for the fuck of it. 10% would be 7.8 billion. It'd be about 780 million. So if you take 15 million a year from that, well, hey, all of a sudden, that's only 700 gumballs, and I'm saying every year we take 15 of those gumballs out. Guess what? In 10 years, you've removed 20% of those gumballs from poverty. 20 years, you're near in half. Yeah, we'll pretend that math makes sense. It's close. I was kind of generous with the rounding for them anyway, but like that's the problem. One, this argument is dated. Two, it's disingenuous because it's only talking about U.S. immigration, not general first world immigration, and it's also keeping our numbers relatively low compared to what they could be, compared to like records in our immigration. Because like, not for nothing, like the era after that immigration, 1880 to 1920, not exactly known as the weakest point in U.S. history. You know, it's kind of where we're the juggernauts after like World War II into after World War One, leading into World War Two, and then the economic like golden era of the United States economy in like the 1950s, 60s, where you had very strong labor unions and like a robust middle class for white people. But whatever.
Of course, we don't pull our immigrants from these desperately poor populations, do we? These people are too poor, too sick, too disconnected to make it here as immigrants. We tend to pull our immigrants out of the better off poor of the world, and Mexico tends to define the type of immigrant that we bring here because the plurality of people come from Mexico.
Yeah, so he's not wrong, but here's like part of his problem. Like the argument was never like this is part of his straw man, right? The argument was never like, oh, we only need to like take people out of poverty, right? Like he's talking about that as though this were like the only moral consideration and we're just lying to make ourselves feel better. Like this is your straw man, right? Like no one's really arguing this. We're saying, hey, it's economically beneficial to us, so maybe we'll take immigrants who are in certain impoverished areas, maybe like Mexico instead of India. Maybe we take some like tech-based immigrants or something. Like I don't know. Like we do these things ultimately to benefit our country, and you can do them to the extent where until they like I guess reasonably don't benefit you. Like I would argue, the same reason we justify like asylum, like globally, right? If you have the means to help someone, you should help somebody, right? And that's the whole basis for like asylum and refugee nations that accept asylum claims and refugees is if you can afford to help someone, you ought to. And we have international and even domestic laws in the United States requiring us to do that. Now, asylum seekers generally cost you money short term. They're not supposed to be an economic benefit to you. These are people running from, atrocities, from persecution, from violence. And that's why these people come to your country. So there's an expectation that you help them, right? Maybe they can't get jobs. Maybe it's a woman fleeing with her 3 kids or something, right? Like this person is going to be known for being like the most economically productive person in an economy. So yeah, maybe you pay, you provide them like food stamps, housing, or whatever, in order to help these people out. It's humanitarian in nature. Now, immigration in general is not necessarily humanitarian. It's supposed to be like, yeah, you come here, you work. We don't really give you benefits if you're an immigrant. You come here, you work, you find a place to live, you make some money, you maybe buy a house, start a family, whatever you do, or send money back home, eventually go back home, whatever you want to do. It benefits both parties in that long-term arrangement. This is like sort of what he's conflating though. Like it was never the stated like sole unilateral goal that immigration would reduce world poverty. Like, yeah, it can help. And even now he's talking about how, oh, this targets certain populations of Mexico, not even the worst off. And it's like, well, yeah, but just because you're not helping the people who are worst off doesn't mean you're not helping people who aren't in bad situations. I mean, there's some places that are in real poverty in Mexico. I mean, once you get to outside of some of the touristy or major metro areas like Mexico City or the Yucatan Peninsula, like, yeah, there's some really fucked up areas in Mexico that are very, very impoverished who send people to the United States to work and send back money because it's kind of like either you go somewhere where there's economic opportunity like the United States, or you probably end up joining a cartel, Some places it's really disparate like that, so... Okay, like I don't. Admittedly, this is in 1996. I don't think cartel issues were like necessarily the same back then. I'm pretty sure they were in like Colombia, not as much Mexico. I could be wrong on that. When did Pablo Escobar get killed? Pablo Escobar. I feel like that was in the 90s, right? 1993. Okay. Yeah, so that was like the Colombian cartel.
How many people in the world live in countries that have average incomes lower than that of Mexico? And the World Bank tells us that number is these 3 billion plus another 2.6 billion people.
Yeah, but here's the problem. He's talking about if you look at countries like the United States where like there's a very high like economic development and maybe a relatively low Gini coefficient or something, which is relative inequality across the country, it's like, yeah, like that's the issue you're running into, because Mexico has affluent parts like the Yucatan Peninsula where Americans and Canadians go to vacation. You know, it's where Cancun is, it's where Playa del Carmen is. There's relatively little crime. There's a whole lot of stuff to do there. Yucatan's very nice. I've been there as an American, you know, touristy. But there are those areas that are impoverished. So, like, yeah, you're giving me the average, but we're talking about immigrants from those lower income areas who aren't coming from places like the Yucatan or Mexico City. They're coming from, like, maybe some, like, I don't know, like lower income villages, like, fuck, I don't know all Mexico's geography. I keep wanting to say Jalisco, but I don't think that's a place. A friend of mine's Mexican born, and he's going to yell at me for this. Map of Mexico. Yeah, that is what I was thinking of. Yeah, fuck yeah, I killed it, man. I was thinking like Guadalajara, but I said Jalisco, but it looks like they're sort of near each other, and that's like a whatever. Hell yeah, I'm less ignorant than I thought I was. That's always good to know.
5.6 billion people in the world who live in countries.
So like this, he's like loading his argument like super hard, right? Like. Yeah, Mexico has, like, when we're talking about a country like, I don't know, like African countries which have, like, no robust economic sector versus a place like Mexico who's, like, not a third world country, it's like a middling country. Like, yeah, of course, like, this is just disingenuous. I think I made it clear, right? Like he's cherry picking, he's giving you the average of Mexico and the average of these other places, while ignoring, like, the low ends of Mexico are comparable to, like, the low ends of like, a random African country that's impoverished. And it's because like Mexico has lows and highs, while like a random African country at this point in time would have like a very steady low.
Comes below that of Mexico. That's 5,600 gumballs. And so what is it that the elites are telling us? They're telling us that when we take this 1 million immigrants, that we somehow or another are tackling world poverty. And we have to do it regardless of the effect on our unemployed, the working poor, the most vulnerable members of our...
So here is just wrong. There's no like proven economic. So I don't know what the data was like in 1996, because I think in the 90s even Bernie Sanders was like opposed to like immigrants because he thought it would hurt like unions and stuff like that. So maybe the data was different then.
Society, we somehow or another.
So like what I'll say is I'll give this guy like room to hang himself, right? Like this is a video from 1996. It's 24 years old at this point, right? Like I get how he could have had information then that differs than what we know now. I mean, maybe he's still being disingenuous. I don't really know. But either way, the issue is people in 2020 sending this video like it hasn't, like it's not incredibly dated and fucking irrelevant and a straw man to begin with.
Are tackling world poverty. And we have to do it regardless of the effect on our unemployed, the working poor, the most vulnerable members of our society.
Yeah, so I don't know if this... Like this idea didn't make Mariel boat lift. So the Mariel boat lift was where I think it was like 20. Oh shit! Now I'm wrong. 125,000 Cubans arrived in the United States, and apparently 25,000 Haitians, which I wasn't aware of, within a year. And they almost exclusively landed in like Miami. And there's been economic studies on this because that's a huge like. Miami population over time. Let's see. I'm actually curious. I don't know what Miami's population was then. That really didn't work. The fuck? Miami population 1980. That's not the metro area. There's no way that's the metro area. All right, whatever. I don't really care. We'll just say it's like a couple million or something. It doesn't really matter. Suffice to say, dropping 125,000 people into Miami in like 1980 represented a very large amount of low skill, impoverished, predominantly male people falling into one area. There's been economic studies on this. I'm not going to go into them now because it's irrelevant. Anyone can Google it. Showing that like there were only very, very small subsets of people who were impacted by that increase in low-skilled labor, but overall it economically benefited across the board. I'm going to say those studies that I'm referring to were largely done in the 90s, though. Let's see. I'm sure they link some of them here. By half of Maryland side permanently 7%. Wages for white Americans remain steady. Saying wages of white Americans remain steady in both Miami and comparable cities. The wages rates for African Americans were relatively steady from 1979 to 1985 when in comparable cities it dropped. So it dropped in comparable cities, but for black people who you think would be also hurt in that time frame, their wages were comparable in Miami. So they weren't even those people you think would be the least well off. Immigrants seem to keep them going. Non-Cubans were stable. Yeah, I mean, there's a few. The Borjas study, this one was a little messed up. And then I think Card responded to it again. They had a little tit for tat on that one. But whatever. But yeah, suffice to say, even this one by Borjas is middling in terms of its criticism. And there are issues with how he overly stratified the data to where it was only when you have a pool of 50,000 people and you're trying to adjust for certain criterias or whatever. If you added too many descriptions, you basically constantly dumbing down your search until there's only a handful of people you're comparing, and the smaller your sample size, the greater variance affects you. Because you can have one person who's an extreme fringe in that, and they're going to throw off the entire average of your 10-person sample or whatever it ends up being. I remember that being one of the criticisms of Borjas' study in this. The area where he identified harm, where the previous study didn't identify harm, involved him giving such a specific niche and criteria that it when they were accounting for that economic data, it was only I'm pretty sure it was less than a dozen people. What he was talking about, which is kind of weird.
Regardless of the effect on our natural resources. Even if we went by the most radical proposals in Washington, which are to actually double our immigration to 2 million a year, which would totally overwhelm our physical, natural, and social infrastructures.
No, it wouldn't. This is just wrong. I mean,
we couldn't
it's if you think we just increased our immigration by twice as much, the U.S. would just start struggling. Economies are really good at I'm not really huge to capitalism, but it's very effective at adapting. If you had large influx of immigrations, one, they're going to go to places where there's work and jobs, and there's plenty of places let's see, population declining. U.S. So it's sort of weird. If you looked at all these metros, let's look at this. This is the top. Okay, I thought it was 100, but I guess it's less than 100. Whatever. These are let's even look at just the top 30, right? There's 3 places here, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Chicago, that have decreasing populations, and these other ones have massively growing populations. Somehow these places are able to Dallas from 2010 to 2019 was able to accommodate 1.2 million people, right? Dallas alone. In the Houston area, another million people they were able to accommodate. Los Angeles, oh look, another it's only 400k people, 400k there. But you can look at some of these places with huge growth rates where they were able to accommodate these large influx of migrants. Now they're not immigrants because they're not going from country to country. All those people are traveling from a place like New York to North Carolina or South Carolina or whatever. Maybe they're going from Florida to California or wherever they're traveling from. That's what's driving a lot of the immigrants to these places, or sorry, not immigrants, migrants, domestically within the U.S. And these cities are able to adapt to those large influxes of populations. He's telling me that we can't handle taking 2 million people in from fucking nowhere. It's well, yeah, we clearly can. We have the capacity to build infrastructure in one city to accommodate 1 million more people, or let's say that's 700, whatever, point taken, right? 1 million people in multiple cities here over the course of a decade. And I'm sure if I go through this whole list, you're going to find infrastructure being built in these metro areas that totals way more than 2 million immigrants a year, that's a ludicrous argument that we can't accommodate 2 million people.
Make a noticeable difference. And we may be really hurting the impoverished people of the world because the million that we do take are among the most energetic, often the better educated, certainly the most dissatisfied people that if they did not immigrate would be the agents for change to improve the lot of all the people in these countries. the true heroes.
I don't think that's like entirely true. Like, I think it's partly true. Like, yeah, you can have brain drain, but that usually refers to like people in like, and I'll use Iran as an example, where people immigrate from a place like Iran or Syria or something, and they just went and got like a PhD there, and then they come to the United States with their PhD that they got for like, you know, through subsidized education or whatever, and now they're not serving that interest there. Now him saying they would be an agent for change when they're like a low income person with like no education, like, I don't know, could they lead a labor revolution? Like maybe, but that seems a little on the generous side. But like a lot of people like that, like I used to know, I worked for a company at one point that employed some people who were illegal, and a lot of them, like, you know, they lived in conditions where they lived like a few people in like a 2-bedroom apartment, like four people. And what they do is they'd save money and they'd send it back home, and they were able to buy like farms for their family to get like established and set up. They were able to build houses for themselves in their home country by working here, living very frugally, and then building back their family at home. So like even this isn't necessarily accurate. It's assuming these people like have a very individual minded focus as opposed to a very community, like family oriented focus, where once they come to the US they send lots and lots of money back. This is like one of the central complaints about immigrants. Oh, they send money back to their home country. It's like, okay, well, we live in a globalized market. Like, does that really fucking matter? And like, who fucking cares? You can spend, like, I buy products that are made in China. Am I sending my money over to China? Like, who gives a shit, you know? Like, that doesn't really matter. But like, whatever. Like, yeah, they're doing that to rebuild, like, or not all of them, but like, there's enough people who do that to like rebuild their communities at home. So like, even this point, it's not necessarily accurate. You come to the US, you get an opportunity, you get a job making $10-12 an hour or whatever, doing like some sort of manual labor. Maybe it's less, maybe it's like $5 to $15 an hour or something, doing some type of manual labor. You live very frugally, and then you send like, you know, maybe like $500 or $1,000 to your family in, you know, Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras, or, you know, you name the country, where that $500 goes a very long way to, you know, helping them, you know, pay rent, buy food, pay for schooling, pay for education, build a house, buy a farm, like all this stuff that it does there that it doesn't do here. So like, even this is not correct that like when they come here, they're not helping their home communities.
Humanitarian field are the people in these countries who have the wherewithal.
I feel like that comes off as an anecdote. I want to go, what percentage of immigrants send money to home country? Let's see. Immigrants have sent over $148 billion to their home countries. Well, that sounds like a lot of fucking money. All over the world. This is in Forbes. Pew Research is estimated that the collective sum of remittance payments in 2017 came to $625 billion. The United States alone is estimated that more than $148 billion was sent to individuals in other countries in 2017. Back in 2004, study found that over 60% of 16.5 million Latin American-born adults living in the country at that time sent money home on a regular. Oh, okay, yeah. So it wasn't just an anecdote, right? That's 60%. That's a pretty large sum. Sent money home on a regular basis. Like, hey, that's pretty cool. Cool.
To immigrate to another country, but instead stay in their countries, to apply their skills to help their fellow countrymen. Unfortunately, our immigration system tends to entice these very type of people to abandon their countrymen.
I feel like I've already addressed this, that it's not abandoning. Like, sometimes the way you can help your family is like go home. So.
Even a dent.
Or sorry, is go to another country, work, and send money back. So
is actually worse than it looks here. Because last year, when we took 1 million immigrants, these countries added, births over deaths, 80 million more people into the impoverished population. And this year...
Let's look at this again. Probably. Okay, let's close all these random fucking shit I got open. So that was 1996. Well, I guess it's like a percentage thing, so all right.
Congress is bringing in 1 million legal immigrants. And this year, according to the United Nations, these countries are expected to add another 80 million people. And next year, you can be quite sure that Congress, unless stopped by the American voters, will bring in another 1 million immigrants. And these countries, unfortunately, will be adding another 80 million.
Ooh, look at that.
Into these impoverished
look at that point he
nations.
made. You know he was just so happy. Like, he 100% planned this, had all these measurements out.
Another
Look at that.
80 million
Oh,
people
man.
into these impoverished nations. We could take 5 million a year, but we'd never get ahead.
I don't think he grabbed
Another
5
80
gumballs
million
there.
people
I'm
in
calling
these
shenanigans.
impoverished nations. We could take 5 million a year, but we'd
That was like
never
3.
get ahead of what's happening in these countries. Not in this century.
Look at that. Look how illustrative that is. You see, like he just did the whole gumball spilling over the thing. You know, some fucking poor janitor, probably like El Salvadorian descent, has got to go clean that shit up now because his asshole had to make his illustrative, stupid, misguided point. And this guy's like, whoa! The same thing. The same thing that every single fucking person who watches this today comes off with.
Don't you see?
Look at that. Oh man.
Immigration
He's like, what a great point he made with the gumballs.
can never be an effective or significant way to deal with the suffering people of the world.
True. If it were the only thing, he might have a point. Unfortunately for him, it's not. And that's the funny part about people who use this video in, I don't know, the year, whatever the fuck it is. Because we can look at this, when he made this video, 1996. So that, like, increase in poverty rate that he was talking about, where there was 80 more million people come in, like, a fucking year or whatever. Well, guess what? When this poverty rate starts dropping down dramatically as such, like, and keep in mind, I don't think this poverty rate is like a good thing. This is like the $2, the $1.90 a day thing, the $1.90 a day thing. I don't think that's a very good estimate of poverty, but this is the estimate he's using, so I'm also going to use it. And by his metric, like, okay, well, fuck, from when he made this video, we had a 30% rate and population of about 6 billion people in the world, maybe a little bit more than that. Which is about a third of the country, which is like 2 billion. So I don't know where he got his like 5 billion from, but whatever. And in that time frame, we can combat it on two ends, right? We can have a robust first world, not just the United States, immigration policy. Fuck, I feel like this should just be a conclusion of this video. He's basically done, right? Okay, fuck it. We'll just make this part of the conclusion, right? So his issue here. Okay, fine. We'll watch it out.
They have to be helped where they live. 99.9% of them will never be able to immigrate to a rich country. There's no hope for that. They have to bloom where they're planted. The only place that 99.9% of these people can be helped is where they live. Let's help them there.
That sounds so feel good, and it's also fully shit, but whatever. So we already kind of discussed that people who come to these countries, he acted as though, let's try and approach this sequentially. Oh man, I'm trying to remember all the weird stuff. Like, there's so much nonsense. One, having people immigrate to the United States exclusively was never the catch-all, end-all, be-all solution for poverty. I do feel like that was a straw man. Maybe the 1996 was a different time. Two, when he brings up like the world poverty thing in 1996, and people use this today, the problem is that poverty rate has dropped from 30% to 10%, or 9.2. Actually, it's even fucking lower. So the relative good you can do with immigration is weird. He also mentions how the U.S., the radical proposal of doubling our immigration rate from 1 million people to 2 million, not really that radical. And how could we maintain doing this? And it's like, well, I don't know, the same way we managed to, deal with a natural population growth or shifting populations from market A to market B, like the same exact way all this stuff has always been done for the history of time. Like what do you even say to that? like over the past, I don't know, 20 years, the world population's increased by like 1 billion people or some shit. This is really not that complicated. Him saying, oh yeah, we also addressed this, where he said, oh, they just come here and they just abandon their families at home. Well, nope, 60% of people, or I guess that's Latin American people in the United States. Is Latin American? There's Latin American, right? Latin American born adults living in the U.S. send money home on a regular basis. So like saying that they just leave and leave those people out to dry and don't help them, not true. And yeah, so we can tackle that from both ends, right? And when we get to this number, like if we doubled like our immigration rate, right? The U.S. will say we go from like to 2 million, which is about what, 1%? Yeah, it's about 1%. Personally, I think we should go higher, but whatever. If we go to about like a 1% immigration rate, and rest of the first world does that, the amount of immigration that we would take in is 15 million, and then 50 million to this much smaller percentage of 9.2 is much more manageable than, that really low number into a very high number that he was giving us before. So I guess the crux of this is maybe at that point in time, one, this is just like this is clearly just showmanship, right?
It's very cute
Last
with the
year,
whole gumball
farmers
thing.
80
Where
million
this thing just
people.
spills out. You know, this is when like a whole bunch of people are like, "Whoa, it's so simple!" But like, let's be honest, like most things can't be explained well in like a 6-minute fucking video. So it's kind of annoying. And like this is just
Next year you could be
clearly like wrong, as I've demonstrated multiple of its like premises and points it's going over.
quite sure that Congress, unless
And I guess we'll conclude this. Where was I? Oh, that noise probably comes up really annoying on the video. Shouldn't do that. Oh yeah, it's just meant to be emotionally evocative. I don't know what this dude's history is. Actually, let's go ad hominem. Let's see what Roy Beck's deal is. He probably works for like the Heritage Foundation or some stupid shit. Anti-immigrant. Okay, he's anti-immigrant activist. Let's see. Anti-immigrant activist. Numbers USA since its inception. Graduate of the University of Missouri. New York Times Beck's numbers over the planet. Enough pressure U.S. senators to defeat comprehensive immigration bill in June 2. U.S. Representative Tom Tancredo? I don't know who that is. Oh, people already did this, huh? We did not alleviate world poverty because so many remained impoverished outside. Let's say. The conclusion was that the United States should restrict immigration more and help the impoverished people where they are. Except, like, people in the U.S. don't even want to do this. Actually, I can't believe I missed that point, right? Like, he made that at the end there, so I was kind of like, what is he really going to add in the last 20 seconds of this video? It was like, we should help them where they are. It's like, you know how much the U.S. loves helping people where they are. Remember when we had, like, the Green New Deal, and people were like, we're going to send billions of dollars to these other countries? And like, you know how excited Americans were about helping countries other than America. Once again, it's like feel good shit that, you know, like, I don't know what his stance in particular is, but like he knows that ain't gonna fucking happen. Like you have to know if you're just preaching anti-immigrant like America first bullshit or whatever, that like this is not happening here. 5 million people gets his audience thinking that 1 million people don't matter because they're such a tiny fraction of 5 billion, but 1 million people do matter. Yeah, that's another good point too, right? Like he's trying to be like, look how little it matters in comparison, but imagine to those million people you're taking in, like how you're improving their fucking lives, you know? Like, could you improve more lives? Yes. Do I think you should try and improve more lives? Yes. Do I think you should do that in multiple ways? Yes. But does that mean that even if everything he said was true, does that mean taking that million people doesn't help them? And the answer is no. But yeah, okay, well, we're gonna end this one. So yeah, that's really it. The gumball video is very stupid, very dated, was dumb when it was made, and is even dumber today.